Southern California Live with Wendell, Johnny Wendell. That would be me at 8:36 on the Patriot, KEIB AM 1150. I don't think you could find anything quite as patriotic or as American as the Ramones. I don't. I would say that if anything embodied the absolute greatness of the United States of America, it would be the Ramones and their backstory. Think about it. These are four people that theoretically did not know how to do something and did not have the wherewithal to do it, and against all odds succeeded. If that isn't the quintessential American story, nothing is. Well, the story is over and the book is closed. Friday at 11:15 a.m., Tommy Ramone was the group's first drummer, became the last original Ramone to pass away. He was 65. It says on the internet he was 62. He was 65. He was born in 1949, and he came to the United States from Hungary, where he was born Tomas Erdelyi. And during the Hungarian Revolution of 56, a lot of Hungarian Jews fled to New York, and Tommy and his brother Peter and his parents were among those. Tommy did not make a big production out of being a Jewish American, but he was, okay? And he settled in New York, and they eventually settled in Forest Hills, Queens, where he met a young man named John Cummings, who played bass in a band with Tommy called the Tangerine Puppets, and they kind of fell out of touch with each other, as people are wont to do. Tommy became an engineer, and I got a credit on the Jimi Hendrix record Band of Gypsies, and became a very accomplished guitar player in a couple of proto-glam bands. Remember the glam bands like T-Rex and Slade, Mott the Hoople, David Bowie, and of course in New York, the New York Dolls. Well, Tommy never forgot his friend or his other peculiar friends back in Queens, and he thought to himself, because he was kind of a studious, cerebral, arty sort of fellow, you know, me and my friends back in Queens, or them, because Tommy wanted to manage them. He didn't want to play in that band. He said, I bet they'd be a more interesting band than anything else that happens, because these guys are very strange. So he assembled his friend John and John's friend Doug and Joey, Jeffrey Hyman, who rechristened himself Joey Ramone. And they got together, and they couldn't find anybody to play the drums for this peculiar music that they were playing. So Tommy sat down one day to demonstrate what the drum part should sound like, and the other three looked at him and said, you should be our drummer. And so the group, the Ramones, was born in 1974, the last year I was in high school. And I was vaguely aware of them about a year later, because I was an avid fan of rock and roll and used to read Cream and Circus magazines, and they were talking about this peculiar new thing that was happening in New York City that didn't really have a name, but it had these exotic people like Patti Smith, who had been a writer for Cream, okay, and she had her own group, and this really strange-looking group of people that called themselves Television, these emaciated, weird-looking guys with spiky short hair. And this new group emerged that all had the same name, all wore the same clothes, and from their description sounded really kind of bizarre, and that was the Ramones. Now, I was a kid, I grew up in eastern Massachusetts, and there was a rock station that would play anything. Even back in the middle 70s, they were still sort of freeform. They were called WBCN. They were on 104.1 FM. And my board operator here, Phil, worked there for a while, many, many years later. Well, there was this wonderful woman who was on in the afternoon named Maxanne Satori, this big, beaming blonde lady. And she was the first person to ever play The Cars. She was the first person, I believe, to ever play Roadrunner, which is now the official rock and roll song of Massachusetts by the Modern Lovers. And she used to play every afternoon a tape, mind you, a tape of this big, powerful, loud song that sort of sounded like the Ronettes and the Crystals and it was called Born to Run. And WBCN played that song as a tape. Okay, they did. They played about 15 of my songs as tape. They were wonderful. But at any rate, Maxanne would play the Ramones in the afternoon every so often, and when I heard them, I was horrified because they just didn't sound like anything. It just sounded like noise, you know. And I'd tell my friends, oh, they're horrible. It's just noise. It's crap, you know. So last week of December 1976, my best friend and I went to the punk rock club in Boston that we went to all the time, the Rathskeller, the Rat. And the Ramones were playing, okay. And, you know, whatever. It's like, I wonder what they'll be like, I thought, you know. And our friends, or this the local group called the Real Kids Open, and they were wonderful, as they always were. And the Ramones came out on stage. They're all dressed the same. They plugged in. Joey said something. Dee Dee barked out 1, 2, 3, 4. They played 15 songs in about a half hour. And I thought it was the greatest thing I'd ever seen in my life. It was like the first time you were an adolescent boy and you saw a naked girl. That's how much I liked it. It was the first time you ever had pizza. You know, it was the first time you ever hit a line drive in between two outfielders. It was that good. And I thought to myself, this is it. This is what things are supposed to be in the world. I have just seen the ideal, because there was no crap in anything they did. There was no diddling. There was no pointless display of instrumental prowess or virtuosity, because you have to remember, back in the 70s, it was how good you were as a guitar player, how good you were on the drums, or how good you were on the keyboards, or how good you were as a singer if you could hit unbelievable high notes like Robert Plant from Led Zeppelin. That was the ideal singer, was to be like Robert Plant. Because even at that point, the hair metal thing was 10 years off, but that was it. You had to be able to hit those unbelievable notes and play unbelievably fast like Jimmy Page, and play the drums like John Bonham. You had to be good, you know. And then I saw the Ramones, and it was clear that they weren't good, you know. They were great, and great beats good. Good is okay, okay? But you know what good is? Good is familiar. It's like tasteful. Whenever I hear somebody refer to something as tasteful in the arts, I know I'm going to freaking hate it, because what that means is it's familiar. You know, it's safe. It's like mayonnaise or something. When you open a jar of mayonnaise, you know what it's going to taste like. You don't want that, okay? And the Ramones were not mayonnaise, okay? I saw them. I was floored by them. I told their manager, who was working the door at the Rat, because otherwise they weren't going to get paid, Danny Fields, that they were the greatest thing I'd ever seen in my life, and nothing else mattered. The next day I went out and bought a black leather jacket, and I tore holes in my jeans, and I got both of their records. The black and white won the first one, and Ramones Leave Home, and became very fanatical and dogmatic on the issue of the greatness of the Ramones, and would always go see them, to the point where they were familiar with who I was. And so I began to talk a lot to them, and, you know, exchange theories and ideas and whatever. They were, you know, they're interesting people, and Tommy was very cerebral and very quiet, but he always said the right thing. He understood to cut through the crap, but he understood that there was a whole new group of people in the world that really, really liked what they did. There weren't many of us, but they got it, you know, and everywhere they went, they sowed the seeds of this new thing. And fast forward about 6 years, and he is sitting in the living room of the girl who sang in my first band, and we're talking about him producing a record for us. And he said, you know, John, he said, it always really gratified me, you know, and it still does the others, because he had left the Ramones by that point, and Mark Bell had replaced him as a drummer. And he said, it always really gratified us that we would, that people like you, you know, he says, you know how to play the guitar. You actually do know how to play the thing, you know, when you sing in tune and your songs are complicated or whatever. That you got it, that you liked what we did, that you understood. He said that meant the world to us, that people that used to like Led Zeppelin now liked us, that we and Led Zeppelin were on the same plane together, not airplane, but a plane. And I was so honored that they cared what people like I thought, when they meant the world to me, because the idea that you would play your own songs, that you didn't really have to be good, but you had to be inspired. You had to have energy. You had to want to knock down the walls. That comes from the Ramones, and it comes from Tommy, because Tommy was an arty guy. The others, God rest their souls, they're interesting people, to be sure. And Tommy couldn't stand being with them after a certain amount of time because they drove him crazy. He was eating Valium like Pez when he quit that band, And he produced records. He produced a Replacements record called Tim. He produced Neurotica by Red Cross, LA's own Red Cross. And he became a bluegrass musician in the latter part of his life. And I'm looking to my left, over my left shoulder, the seat that he sat in. Phil, did you engineer that show when Tommy was here with his wife?
I sure did.
Yeah, and Gina was producing.
Yeah.
And we had the best hour. And I didn't want to ask him too much Ramones stuff. I wanted to talk about what he was doing now, but I had to ask him, and I said, do you see that simple bluegrass songs based in 3 chords and repetitive chants, that's just like the Ramones. It's just not through loud amps. And he said, yes, that's true. And it's for that reason that you don't get more American than the Ramones. Hearing the Ramones, hearing Rockaway Beach or Blitzkrieg Bop or Pinhead or any of those songs, you get this great pride in that this distills what it's like to be an American, that I can come up from nothing, but I have a great idea, and I'm going to work really hard and persist, and nothing is going to stop me. And that band was his creation. I've seen documentaries on the Ramones where the others knock him and they say, well, he's the right place, the right time, he was nothing. And I'm sure that must have really hurt him. Okay. But he invented them. He was a man who understood Andy Warhol's dictums on minimalism and how you present yourself. He knew. He got it. He invented them. He created them. And now he is resting, as the others are as well. And a final note on the issue of Tommy Ramone and why this is so critical. 3 months ago, the Ramones' first album, the black and white one, the iconic one with them leaning up against the wall with Johnny the middle finger sticking out of his pants, that one lived. When Moby Grape did it 10 years earlier, they had to airbrush it out. But anyway, it went gold. It sold 500,000 copies as of this April 2014, nearly 40 years later, and Tommy lived to hear it, lived to see it, and that must have made him happy, because he must have realized there are over 400,000 Johnny Angel Wendell types in the world that used to like Yes and Emerson, Lake and Palmer and King Crimson, and now they liked me, and 500,000 of them bought my record. And this is our favorite. Rest in peace, Tommy. We love you.
Hey, little girl, I wanna be your boyfriend.
Southern California Live with Wendell. Phil, first band I ever saw do I Want to Be Your Boyfriend was not the Ramones. Do you know who it was?
No idea.
The Talking Heads.
Really?
Yeah. I saw the Talking Heads before I saw the Ramones. They played the same place, the Rat in Boston, which I guess, I'm trying to think, I think the equivalent to the Rat in L.A. would have been the Mask. That's for super going way back there punk rockers, the Mask and the Starwood and all those places in the 70s. But the Mask was not too far from us in Hollywood. But anyway, the Talking Heads were a trio at that point, and I had no idea why I decided to. Probably because I'd go see anything at the Rat, because it was always it was bound to be good, And they came out, and they were David Byrne was in this little polo shirt, and Chris was playing his nice simple beat behind him, and Tina was on the bass. I was crazy about Tina, But anyway, My wife knows this. Come home and she's like, "Who's this Tina?" Like, it hits me in the head with a frying pan or like a rolling pin, like olive oil pounding on Popeye, right? No, she knows. And David Byrne goes, "This is a Ramones song, and it's called 'I Want to Be Your Boyfriend.'" And they did it. It was really good, you know. I mean, they were the Talking Heads. Of course, it was really good, you know. But I remember reading about how I Want to Be Your Boyfriend was intended to be covered by the Bay City Rollers, of all bands, you know. And I think that they finally determined that they didn't want the Bay City Rollers to do it or something like that. But it's remarkable to me that when I am in the car with my kids and I'm taking them to school, or we're going to the pool, or we're going to the skate park or something, and you listen to some of the modern music that isn't even rock music, you can tell that the influence of the Ramones is in certain things. There was this huge hit last year, I think, by this group Icona Pop. I think they're girls from either Sweden or Italy, right? And they had this song called "I Don't Care, I Love It," right? And it was all synthesizers and that big booming boom, 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 4 on the floor disco beat. But it was 2 chords and the same verse over and over and over again. And I laughed and I thought, this could be a Ramones song. It was, you know, blah, 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 the day that you were gone, I crashed my car into the bridge and then I let it be. You've heard that song before, right? I let it burn. Yeah, I don't care. I love it. I don't care. And da 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 dum dum dum. I don't care. The Ramones had an "I Don't Care" song too, you know, and I'm just like laughing, going, I can't believe this. It's like their influence is on everything, and yet they didn't sell that many records, you know. People, but they're fans. You know, people like me, or what's really weird is how unbelievably popular they are among Spanish-speaking people. In South America, they were like Rolling Stones sized big. Like in Argentina, who lost the World Cup today, you know, in Argentina, they'd play football stadiums.
But why didn't they sell more records then?
Down there they did. Here, because they weren't played on the radio. We found, I always wondered why it was that a band whose songs were so catchy didn't have hits. And you talk to radio people from back then, and they'd say, we love the Ramones. The problem is you can't segue anything in and out of them because they're so unique. And there's an expression in Latin, sui generis. They're sui generis. There was nothing like that. What do? You can't get in and out of their songs, you know, and they're too fast, you know, and there are no solos in them. Oh, somebody's calling me. I don't know why. But anyway, that's Tommy Ramone, their founder and their original drummer, died. He was 65 on Friday, and we've been talking about Tommy. He was a guest on this show for an hour playing bluegrass with his wife, Claudia. Wonderful people, wonderful musician. And I can't even imagine his feeling of every time he would turn on a baseball game or a basketball game and the audience would go, hey, ho, let's go. He wrote that. Then you know your spirit will live forever. Southern California Live with Wendell. We'll see you next week. Bye-bye.